Today's show is all about software-defined access. It's the introduction. We're here to get you up to speed. It's time for TechWise TV.
Big promises always put me on guard, especially from big vendors. I think most of us have developed a survival instinct. Throw the caution flag when found in the presence of overblown superlatives.
I mean, how many big promises have we heard over the years? I still get spam. Robots? I'm still washing my own dishes. What gives? I still subscribe to cable, Netflix, Amazon Prime, plus a few premium channels, and I still can't find the movie I know is available. In fact, I have all the elements of a smart home. Except for my locks don't talk to the lights. The garage doors are giving Alexa the silent treatment. And my kids have learned how to guide their friends past the cameras when they want a little unrecorded visit. At least my Meraki wireless setup alerted me to the rogue hotspot my son was building to get past the Wi-Fi restrictions.
Which makes it all the harder to get well-deserved attention centered on truly great innovation.
Like with what Cisco has just announced with software-defined access.
And this is worth a closer look. In fact, it's quite exciting because we don't make promises on TechWise TV, we demonstrate reality. Today's show is our introduction to software-defined access. We cover state of the enterprise, what happened to the promise of simplicity, constantly creating workarounds for network design challenges. Introduce DNA Center as a way to centrally manage your entire network. And 4 key components that encapsulate everything you need for daily network interaction. And we'll show you where this came from, plus the ease of moving to and living in a policy-based network that embraces mobility, security, and cloud. And Rob will kick us off now in the lounge with Carl Solder.
Well, Carl, I'm so happy to have you back on TechWise TV, because we went through this long dry period. We had you on a long time ago, like 100 episodes ago. But then I haven't missed you because we've been talking a lot over the last year and a half.
We have.
You and your team have been hard at work. We're finally able to go public.
Yes.
So SD access, I think we're calling it, but it's software-defined access.
Yes.
Is the big announcement. And within those 3 little letters or 3 words lies a whole lot of work. And that's what I want to understand really, which is why is this acronym any different than the other acronyms we tend to roll out here all the time? Because we're saying it, and I truly believe it now that I've had a chance to fully understand it. This is big, and this changes and provides options for people, I truly believe, in a way that we've never had before. And so with that grandiose introduction, could you set the stage for how did we get to this point that now is the right time? What's been the environment that has caused us to say, let's do this now?
Absolutely, Rob. So it really, I guess this whole project started off rolling back to 2007, 2008 when the industry launched SDN, software-defined networking.
Okay.
And back then it was literally a PhD thesis project at Stanford University, clean slate. And the idea around that was, if knowing everything we know about networking, if we were to throw everything away and start from scratch, how would we go about building a network? And SDN came out of that, and it really had the promise to revolutionize networking as we know it. Now, a lot of vendors across the market, including Cisco, jumped in and started developing various SDN technologies. Reality was that focus of it was primarily on data center, solving problems in the data center, not so much on the enterprise. But what we've done is that we've taken all those lessons that we've learned from those developments, because interestingly, there's a parallel on the enterprise side. The problem sets we were solving with SDN on the data center side, we can equally utilize those to solve similar problem sets on the enterprise side. And so that's really what kind of spawned the whole notion that we can do something to reinvent enterprise networking as we know it.
So one good distinction to make is that when we're talking about it, at least for now, because it feels like something we're going to be working on for years.
We will.
But we're really speaking in terms of the enterprise network, which we would define as the campuses, large campuses, multiple sites, so those things outside the data center, at least for the moment.
Yep.
What are the problems that, in my mind when I look at it, the problems are these big intractable things that we almost forgot they were problems and we've been working around them for so long. What are the type of things that we were seeing that we're saying, hey, if we did this, now I see how we can solve this, and that might have a positive ripple effect?
Sure. So on the data center side, I guess examples of problem sets that they were trying to solve with SDN, application analytics, application mobility, multi-tenancy, policy, elastic services, all big things that we're trying to solve. When you look at enterprise, there are, as I said, you can draw a lot of parallels from those problem sets. So in enterprise, it's focused on users, devices, and things, as opposed to data center, which is primarily more on applications. But
Right.
on the enterprise side, we still have to look at mobility. Users have laptops, they have tablets, they're moving around. So just as much as we're looking at solving problems with application mobility, user mobility, application analytics, understanding analytics around our users' devices and things. On the data center side, we have multi-tenancy. On the enterprise side, we have user and device segmentation. And still we want to have consistent policy between the two. And there's also a need to have services spin up in the enterprise as well, to support additional scale and performance. Things like additional wireless LAN controllers we might want to spin up. Malicious traffic might hit our enterprise network. We might want to spin up an IDS IPS to inspect that, and maybe a firewall spun up to better protect our network. So the notion of services is also equally applicable on the enterprise side. So taking all those technologies and how we went about solving the problem sets on the data center side, we can leverage all of that to build our framework for how we build that next generation enterprise network.
I think our core audience is already familiar with why this is the case, but just taking an isolated example of that I think most users don't get. But why is it? It doesn't seem like it's a big deal for me. Sometimes I work in this office. This afternoon I'll be in a different building. I'll work from the hotel later tonight. I'm back home at my home office. I get onto the network.
Yep.
What's so difficult about this? I feel like I'm mobile. What problem are we really solving? What's really happening behind the scenes that needs to be overcome?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that are happening here. You're right, to the user it looks very simple, but behind the scenes there's a whole range of configuration effort that has to happen in order to make that a reality. And the amount of configuration effort can be, for some customers, quite significant. And we're really trying to simplify the whole experience of how you go about implementing things like policy. For example, in the past, we had some very defined ways in which we went about building out our networks. We had golden rules.
Yeah.
Tannenbaum is a classic book that a lot of people might have
must
read.
read if you're
absolutely.
in the early days. Yeah.
But it defined rules like VLAN equals IP subnet, and when we built our policies, it was using IP-based access control lists. It was all tied to the IP address. In this new world, we want to kind of break away from that. We want to move towards tying policy to user identity and also devices. And as we bring in these things, the whole IoT movement comes in. There's a whole range of new devices. We have to think about how our policy framework extends to that. So it's time for a rethink. We have to rethink about how we do things to make things more simple. And the reality is networks are not getting any less complex. We are continually throwing more and more features at customers. So how can we abstract away that complexity while still enabling to get maximum value out of the investments that they're making in our products?
No, it's interesting. I think sometimes easy user access is equated to a cross your fingers because we need to keep the users moving, but we're hoping nothing goes wrong on the backside. And so you feel like you can't implement as much policy due to the complexity or the things holding you back because all of a sudden it breaks other things because we're just fighting ourselves constantly. Sure. So I want to bring up this diagram that kind of overviews what we're talking about from a point-by-point perspective. Can you walk us through what we're seeing here so we can put some reality to it?
So it's good that we actually talk about what does SD access really mean and what components make up. So along the bottom here, you can see a whole range of devices, switches, routers, wireless LAN controllers, access points, all the stuff that we know and love and have worked with over many years. That really constitutes devices that will become part of this fabric, and they're going to be managed by the controller, APIC EM. On top of APIC EM, we have this application, DNA Center. And this is really where the magic starts to happen. Okay. It's the window that the user will use to manage that fabric of devices. Now, DNA Center will have 4 key attributes to it: design, provision, policy, and assurance. Okay. So 4 key functions that you'll have in that app. It's also partnered with 2 other key components. We have the Identity Services Engine, which is our policy store. That's the component that will push down those policies that we create into the network. And on the right-hand side, a new bit of technology, Cisco Network Data Platform. Yes, this is our new analytics engine, and it's finely tuned to collecting telemetry in the fabric around users, devices, and things. And so it's going to do some crunching. It's going to collect that telemetry and present it in a more informed manner for the customer to consume through DNA Center.
Interesting, because I think that's a part that we've always done as an add-on if we did it at all, because it always felt very expensive, but fundamentally necessary, because it's the closing the loop of knowledge, of understanding, well, what is really happening, and you're speaking in real-time terms. And the best way to possibly do that, of course, is if you're doing it intrinsically with the network, not simply trying to scrape whatever the network happens to give you.
Yes.
So I like that. I love the fact that we've got APIC EM, because we've been telling customers for a while they're finding value in APIC EM before this.
Yes.
So so that's a component someone should already be playing with anyway, because it's free. And the functions you can start doing with it are just magical. If you're not doing QoS with this thing, you should be looking at it at the very least. Love the fact that we're continuing to extend the ISE, which has been around a long time, but it's getting simpler and simpler.
Yes.
Just calling out some components I really love. So the new stuff, NDP, certainly DNA Center.
Yes.
From an equipment perspective, I know we have new switches out. Are the new switches required in this environment, or
they
what's our
will
balance
work in that
there?
environment, but a key focus of our development here is to support brownfield.
Okay.
So we made, we started to look at this and we said we have to be able to support existing equipment that's out there. So existing Catalyst switches, 3K, 4K, 6K, Nexus 7K, existing routers, ISR, ASR, and the wireless LAN controls and access points that are out there today will all be supported in this. We'll need a software upgrade because
so they got to be able to support that software upgrade.
So there's a new software upgrade that will be required to work with the controller and DNA Center, but that's the extent of it. But the actual investments in the hardware will be intact.
Before we move on, just one final thing. I wonder, so these 4 things that are on the outside here, can you walk me through, because I was left with the impression that this felt pretty comprehensive.
Yes.
And so I want to see if anyone else shares that with me, of course, as well. What are they each responsible for?
Sure, they really try to encompass the whole day 0, day 1, day 2 operation set. So we start off with design. This is about building out your site hierarchy, regions, sites, your buildings, floor maps, doing heat maps, RF planning, and so on. Also, it's about OS image management and IP address management, figuring out the IP address blocks you're going to be using for connected users and devices. Provisioning is really about simplifying the whole provisioning experience, taking a lot of the knowledge and the intelligence we have in things like Cisco validated designs, adding that into the controller so that when a user onboards a device, with a few simple clicks, we're deploying best practice world-class configurations on those devices.
Nice, okay.
On the policy side, again, it's about building out your virtual networks, your user segmentation policies, access control policies, application priority policies, and having those applied in a consistent manner. And then last but not least, it's the assurance, which is both the monitoring aspects, understanding what's happening in your network, and troubleshooting. So providing you with more guidance on where problems are occurring, and even we want to provide a fix-it button for certain types of problems where if something happens, we know how to fix it. We'll say, hey, do you want me to fix it? Click here. And have the controller
if you can do
it
it.
for you.
No, that's amazing because, so everything is running through, so DNA Center becomes your one portal into this world. And what sounds like it's different here, we're going to take a look at DNA Center next, but what it really sounds like is this is the fully automated vision of saying from day 0 through day N, everything can be handled through here, because it's not the complexity magically goes away, but there is a better way of dealing with it, right? So it's all still there. And in fact, we don't even hide it. I know customers can still get exposed to it. So it really is going to play really well for certain customers who are believing in it and need that type of thing. Other customers may be going a more programmatic route and they want to start accessing, as we continue to open up our platforms for that. So CLI doesn't go away. All that kind of stuff is there. So nothing to fear from that perspective, right? We're not about to just put it in a big opaque container for you. But I think this kind of thing is really needed because I think there's less error and there's more, this gets us more keeping up with what our software side is doing, right? We need business velocity when it comes to network, right?
Less error prone, more consistent application of the configuration elements we want to apply, and getting more detailed insights around what's actually happening in your network.
I like that. We can do more of that. So it's, I was trying to remember the term, used policy-based automation?
Policy-based automation from edge to cloud.
From edge to cloud. Okay, we'll run with that. Well, guys, hang on, because we're going into the lab next. Shawn joins Lauren in the lab. We're going to go through DNA Center and look at exactly how you do these things, make sure your questions are answered, and then we're going to do a whole nother show to go even deeper so we can show you the technologies, things that you're going to recognize of how all this stuff works together. It just makes a lot of sense once you start understanding what's happening here. It's truly an exciting time. Software-defined access in the lab next.
Shawn, we're talking about DNA Center and how it really gives us a GUI to manage almost everything, or actually everything within our campus fabric. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of automation tools, but traditionally you had to do them in, different ways. You'd have to go to one and configure one, go to a different one, configure that, finally all that. So, really DNA Center is the first one to bring all these different things together. So that's what I'm going to show you today.
Awesome. Can't wait. Let's get started.
All right, so this is the new DNA Center landing page. I've already logged in, so I skipped that piece. And if you're already familiar with APIC-EM, then this should already be very familiar to you. All the existing tools from APIC-EM are already present. So examples like discovery, topology, plug and play, easy quaz, all these things already exist. So we have, of course, brought that in with the DNA Center. But what's really new is how we're going about doing it and how we combine all those different tools together.
So day 0 to day N.
That's right. That's right. And all the different people in a company that have to fill these different roles. For example, there's solution architects, there's installers, there's security folks. They each have their own job, but traditionally you'd had to go to different tools and these kind of things. So we're going to take care of all those things with this tool.
Great. Let's get started.
Cool. So the first thing I'll start off with is design, and this is really geared towards your solution architect. So just like the name suggests, it's really being built virtually. You're just designing the network. Nothing's actually come in. You're just putting it all on paper, working your way through it.
You may not even have the hardware yet.
Probably don't even have the hardware yet.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the guy that he probably had Visio and a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. He's just trying to think his way through it. So it's built out in a virtual way. Of course, we start with the maps, right? So many companies, have different locations around the world. So we start off with that, and of course, I have many already pre-provisioned. Try to keep things quick, but you can see it's built up in basically a hierarchy. It actually calls it network hierarchy, right? So if we take a particular example, start with the United States, right? You can zoom in, and you can see I have a couple different locations, kind of East Coast, West Coast thing. And then even here, where TechWise TV is in San Jose, California, right? Then we've got various buildings built up here.
It's like Google Map representation of.
Exactly.
Okay.
So just for example, I can add a new building, and TechWise is in a building called Building 13. Right, so we'll add Building 13 in there real fast.
Now you've given away our super secret location.
Well, yeah, and then unfortunately I have to put in the actual address. It's in a cool place called Cisco Way.
Yep,
We even got our own roads and everything. So what it did was it's building that Building 13 there, right? So once it gets to that piece, right, now I can go down to specifically Building 13. Right, now under each one of the buildings, then I can do things like add a floor, right? So again, the whole purpose here is really to build it virtually.
Right.
So I know that there's a new Building 13, equipment's coming in next month, and I need to put all the configuration in place for it, right? So I can build up the characteristics of it. In this case, I give it some dimensions, click add, it's going through. Now, one of the cool things is you can insert your own floor plans here, right? So you can see it supports many different formats, JPEG, PNG. It'll even do 3D CAD.
Wow.
So you can deal with it virtually in 3 dimensions. It's very nice. I'm just going to use a basic image in this case. So you can see the floor plan. Now, like I said, one of the other advantages is to logically lay out the network. So one of the jobs of the architect is to decide where wiring goes, where does the wireless access points go.
And that's very important, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
For laying out your wireless network, the access points need to be placed in such a way so that there's not interference and so that you're using them efficiently as well.
That's right. That's right. So you can see, just in this one example, I dropped in an access point, and it gives you some information about it, and then I'll be able to do that RF management piece of it. So now I have what are the basic constructs of a site, okay? So the next thing is network settings, okay? So this is how APIC-EM and DNA Center will actually communicate to other services.
All my common services, DHCP, DNS.
DHCP. We talked about the identity services engine, doing these kind of things. Of course, we need some kind of device credentials, so this is how it talks to the switches and routers.
Can you use HTTPS?
That's right, all these different items. Now, another thing that's really important about design is IP address management. We've actually put it in here on purpose because this is, again, happening before the site actually comes online. So he's just figuring out, what's the kind of addressing I'm going to use in this new location.
Sure. And I like this because it's not, it's as easy as an Excel spreadsheet, but it's actually useful. So it's going to be always up to date because you're actually assigning IPs from here but it's just a lot easier to consume.
Going from one tool to the next tool and trying to keep all that synchronized. That's right. So, I can add a new one here. You just see based on the drop down. I'll skip this because I have
Sure.
already had those. But you can see it's very simple.
People
Add
know
in
what
the
IP pools are.
Yeah.
Yep.
One thing I will also say is DNA Center will also integrate via the APIs with external IP address tools.
Nice. So like an infoblox,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
that is very,
Like-
especially people already have their whole IP schemes established using those tools.
Just
and
import it in here, and it's available to the
perfect.
tool.
Yeah, that's great.
So the last step in here is wireless, because again, this is all of, routing, switching, and wireless. Being able to set up your wireless SSID. So again, I'm planning basically where in San Jose all my IPs will be, where's my wireless, these kind of things. So it's real simple to add an SSID.
And this is going to be applied to all of your WLCs.
That's right.
Yeah.
Everything that's within the constructs of that site.
Okay.
So in this example, I'll show guest, because there's different types. You can have a regular enterprise wireless. You can also set up guest wireless in here. And you can see it's a very simple interface. If you're used to the wireless LAN controller interface, this is familiar to you. But that's it. I just did that, right? Save that information off, and now that information is available to me through my site profile.
It seemed too easy.
Yeah, it is. It's very easy. Other things that are interesting are things like IP address management, right?
So image management?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So as the devices come in, maybe they've got an old software version, I can define all that information in here, and then it will just upgrade them automatically.
So I can actually provision that image from DNA Center.
That's right. That's right. So once I've completed that, now, again, the output is a profile, right? And this is traditionally where the architect would give the installer, here's a bunch of config files, and go get the right software. Here, the profile is just immediately available to the installer, right? Now let me take you over to policy. So this is really designed for your security staff, your policy staff. They may be a different team, they may be in the same team, but traditionally there was a lot of back and forth between the network team and the security team, like what IP subnets did you have, these sorts of things. The nice thing about this is utilizing the TrustSec elements and group-based policy, I don't actually have to know what the network IP addresses are at this point.
It's no longer about subnets or VLANs. It's just what people I want where, or what servers I want where.
Exactly. Exactly right. So the first thing you land on, and one of the critical elements for software-defined access, is the idea of a virtual network. So this is a true routing isolation. So, if you're familiar with things like MPLS, this gives you the same capabilities, but again, in a very simple user interface. So if you do not need that kind of capability, you're always given this default VN. So, you're always given this
Kind of a
basic
catch-all.
It's a catch-all, exactly right. And then again, if I want that kind of capability, then it's very simple to add a new virtual network. So we talked about guest. I'll just create a basic guest virtual network.
And this kind of creates a VRF.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
On the actual routers and switches, you're creating a VRF. Now, within a VN, you've got the various different groups. And these are again, just scalable group tags that we talked about in TrustSec. And, all I have to do then is simple drag and drop, take some of these items, put them in here. And just like that, I associate these different entities with this virtual network.
Okay. So possibly all of these could communicate, depending on how I set up security, but...
That's right. That's right. And the important thing is again, this is all happening virtually. I haven't actually provisioned anything. There's no IP subnets involved. I'm just, as a policy staff, deciding how I want to organize these different.
Haven't even
modules.
ordered the hardware yet.
Nope.
Okay.
Not at all. So if you're curious where these groups come from, we talked about the interaction of APIC-EM and the Identity Services Engine. So where I get this group information from is actually from ICE.
Okay.
So that registry page is just kind of listing off where groups that I have and where they came from.
Could you pull it from Active Directory or something like that?
You can. ICE will always be kind of a in-the-middle translation point because they'll come in different formats, but ICE is able to translate all that from different formats. So Active Directory, we also do Cisco's ACI solution and others, Amazon Web Services, these kind of things. So once I've defined that, then that information comes from ICE and into APIC-EM.
That makes sense.
So now I've got virtual networks, I've got my groups. The last piece, very simple, start creating policies. So you can see I've got a few of them that are already programmed, they're already deployed.
Deny, like you're a security guy or something.
That's right, all I do is deny. Well, and you know, similar to a traditional IP-based access list, right? You still have this idea of a source and a destination, but instead of an address, now it's just a group.
Yeah.
Source group, destination group.
Groups could contain multiple subnets.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly right. And they can move around and all these kind of things. So, you know, taking this example, right? Drop in a couple on the source, right?
Oh, so you can do multiple. That's kind of cool too.
Absolutely. And I
Uh-huh.
can even like click on several down here, and then drag all 5 of them in,
Nice.
right? And so this is just relationships between the source single group or multiple groups to single or multiple destinations.
Okay.
Purely on a group name, right? So we'll give it something, we'll call it TechWise.
You
You
better
give it some
deny.
description.
You shouldn't let us do anything.
Now, the last piece on this is really the contracts. So there's a relationship source destination, but then it's what can I do between these two? So in a very simple example, which I'm showing here, is just permit and deny. But it can even go further than that, right?
Yeah, like an ACL kind of.
That's right.
Okay.
Normally, ACL, you'd have things like a layer 4 port, what kind of applications. So this is one of the really exciting pieces, because again, all this is happening virtually. You know, I'm just deciding whether I allow that or not and what quality of service I give, those things.
Very cool. And it's nice that it's simple. I mean, obviously, that's a simple example, but the GUI makes it very easy to
That's right.
just think of it logically.
That's
I want
right.
these and these people to talk.
That's it.
Okay.
All right, so save that off. That policy will then begin being provisioned on the individual routers and switches, right? So again, through the automation piece of it, you know, it makes the whole thing very, very simple. So last, let me take you off to provisioning.
We got the hardware finally.
Finally got the hardware. It's finally being installed. So you see the first thing we land on is the devices themselves. And this could be, you know, your entire network. This could be hundreds or thousands of devices. So the first thing here you want to do is basically, you remember the profile from design, right, is I want to associate them with that site, right?
SJC13.
That's right, that's right. You can do it at multiple levels. I can do it based on like the San Jose level. I could do it based on the USA level, or I can do it specifically on this building. So I said, this is equipment in SJC13,
Okay.
all right? Once it does those things, then one last piece, which is to turn them on, to provision them, basically.
You
And
do assign configuration, right?
now I'm actually pushing all that configuration down to it, right? So now they've got those particular pieces. And then I go in to create the fabrics themselves. Now, similar to the policy element, right, where I said, you know, if you don't want to have logical divisions, you can just use the default virtual network. Same kind of logic here. If I want to create different fabric networks, different campus fabrics, like we've discussed, then I can add new ones here. So perhaps this is on geographic lines. So the difference between a San Jose fabric and a New York fabric.
Sure.
Something like that. But if you don't want that or you don't need that, then you're at least presented with a default fabric.
Another catch-all.
Yeah, another catch-all. So we drill down in there, right? And so now we're starting to see the actual equipment that's been added to this site, okay? There's some interesting widgets with the application itself. I can zoom it, I can move it around, these kind of things. And then it's very simple. So I've set up my profiles, I've set up my policies. All I really need to do now is add these devices to the fabric.
Design, policy, provision.
You got it. Now, we talked in other episodes about the need for a control plane. We talked about border nodes, and we talked about edge nodes, that kind of thing. So that's effectively what you're doing here. You need to define at least one of them as a control plane, right? And then one or more of them as a border, the way that I get to the outside network.
Okay.
And then you've got your various distribution access layer switches. And since they're not doing any special job like the control plane or the border, you just add them to the fabric. Very simple. So far, you've seen me just do single connects. You can also do a multi.
That's
connect.
nice when you have dozens,
That's
maybe
right.
hundreds of switches.
Exactly right. Now, the very last piece is wireless LAN controllers, and we talked about adding this new wireless into the fabric. So now we can even add wireless LAN controllers into
and
the
it
fabric.
gets the proper configuration because we already did that in the design phase.
That's right, exactly right. So you save that off, and then at that moment, all of the overlay configuration is finally being pushed on there. So we've built our underlay, we've built our overlay, all the policy information's present with a couple of clicks.
That's awesome. So literally we're managing our entire campus fabric through one central point of provisioning. Different roles in the company can use this in different ways, and it's all automated.
Completely automated.
Shawn, that was fantastic. Thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
joining me again. And that's it for the Intro to SD Access show. Please tune into our deep dive for more information. It should already be available. Thank you for watching today. Be sure and follow us online. All of our social media stuff should be somewhere on the screen. You can always find all the shows, including the back catalog, at techwisetv.com. See you on the next one.